What's going on, Governors? Chisgule here, and today we're going to talk about legendary and epic infantry pairings. If you have to pick one of each, what's the best pair? Hello, my friends, and welcome back. This is going to be a guide oriented towards players that are free to play or low spend, but at the very end, we're going to cover the very best pairs for legendary and epic commanders, even for a big ol' whale. Now, if you like Rise of Kingdoms guides, where we help you get the most bang for your buck or the most punch out of your commanders, then you should like and subscribe. We are a sponsored creator with Rise of Kingdoms, and we do make daily content. So, what is the best pair of a single legendary with a single epic if you're making one march in Rise of Kingdoms? This is a really interesting question. We put a lot of thought into this one, especially oriented towards our free-to-play players and low spenders. So let's talk about what is actually realistic, which is that I'm going to, as we look at these commanders, focus much more heavily on Richard I, Charles Martel, and then also Alexander the Great and Constantine, who, there he is, Constantine. The reason we're focusing primarily on these commanders is that, maybe you're going to wait for like a year and a half to get to the point where you're getting potentially Leonidas or Guan Yu, and like maybe that's a thing you'll do. We'll talk about whether or not we think that's a great idea. Spoiler alert, I don't think it is. So we're going to hone in on commanders that are more realistic for the earlier game for a free-to-play or low spender. The other thing that we need to do as we look at these commanders and say, what are the best pairs? I actually am going to rule one out for you. I'm going to take Charles Martel, and we're going to put him off the table in consideration for a legendary and epic pairing. Now, why is that? I do not think it's a good use of your universal legendary commander sculptures to put into a commander that you can get from gold keys. Keep getting your free value for as long as you can with this style of commander. Do not use your universals here. And I've actually got a video about that card up in the top. So that actually leaves us 3 legendary commanders to work with, which is a lot more reasonable. You've got Richard I, you've also got Alexander the Great, and you've got Constantine. Now, my argument is going to be, generally, that you will first invest in Esong and try to expertise him, and that is a really solid legendary investment. But let's set that aside too. If we're just looking carte blanche at these 3 legendaries, which one do I think is the best for you to work on, and what is the best epic pairing? If we look at these commanders, there actually is a little bit of a difference between them. Richard I is good in the open field and in garrison. Alexander the Great is good for rallying stuff and in the open field. And lastly, Constantine is good in the open field and for garrison. Now, the reason Constantine's good in the open field is because he's going to offer everybody a 10% damage taken reduction, which is really solid. I actually think that's quite exceptional, really great there. He also is, of all of these commanders, in my opinion, the best garrison commander to potentially be a primary, and is a really good candidate for defending your city. Now, for a free-to-play to low spender, I'm going to make the argument that focusing on commanders where you get maybe a little more utility is a value play. And in this instance, rather than going for Alexander the Great, who is one of my favorite commanders in the game overall, I think that you get a little bit more value by being able to work on your garrison and protect your city. If you're following my guidance of expertising Esong as your first legendary, then your next legendary, in my opinion, likely ought to be Constantine. Constantine, I think, is the pick. Then you end up with a Constantine primary, Esong secondary city defense. Whew, baby. And, by the way, if you do eventually decide you want to spend more, or you find your way in a high-power alliance so that you're getting tons of free speed-ups and you can make your way to T5, then look, the advantage of having a Constantine means that you now can defend against the Attila Takeda, which will be coming your way. And just to hone in on the reality of that for just a little bit, there are free-to-play players that have made it to T5 in a year, maybe sooner. And the way that you go about doing that is you start with a jumper group. You start with a group that's going to spend a lot of money, but you don't have to initially. You'll get a ton of value by being there. You get all the goodies. You form a bunch of camaraderie, and you stay with that group all the way through. And a great jumper group can leave you in a really good situation. So tangent aside, I'm going to make the argument that the best legendary for you to invest in is Constantine. If that is what you're going to do, you're going to have to unlock him from a Mighty Governor. You might have to do that over the course of several Mighty Governor cycles, getting a few sculptures here and there, and in a worst case, falling back on Alexander the Great or Richard I is also a fine choice. But let's work with Constantine as my number one pick for the legendary that you should be working with. Now let's talk about the epics that you pair with. And, regardless of what legendary you pick, spoiler alert, Sun Tzu is going to be the best epic to pair with. So let's set him aside because we already know he's the very best. And let's assume you've already got him deployed somewhere else in the battlefield or somewhere else in your Lost Canyon setup because he's so gosh darn good. The next commander that you might want to look at for a utility standpoint is Joan of Arc. Now, why do I focus on utility for free to play and low spenders? It is because the amount of buffing and debuffing that you do from abilities doesn't change regardless of your technology, whereas the amount of damage you do will. So those high spenders can focus on high damage commanders. None of what you're doing here is based on a damage factor or healing factor. Same is true with Constantine, by the way. So you're going to be in a really good position with commanders that are doing these style of buffs. But let's assume your Joan of Arc is already deployed somewhere else because, look, there's a lot of great places you can use Joan of Arc. Let's talk about other combos that will be really solid. Now, what I would have chosen as my next best pick as a pairing with Constantine was going to be Boudica. However, the attack reduction she does on her first skill is not going to stack with Constantine's 40% attack reduction, which lasts for 5 seconds. This is only a 25% reduction that would last for 2 seconds. This will not even apply to the target at all. So for that reason, I'm going to make the argument that I would not go the route of using Boudica and instead would use Olgi Mundak. Olgi Mundak is solid for offering a defense reduction. There's some damage factor here, which will be nice, and a cool 30% of stats to infantry, which you're going to be using with your Constantine in the open field anyways. You could use them together as a garrison pair, but look, in your city garrison, it doesn't matter if you're all focused on infantry or cavalry or archers, because you're going to have all those different troop types in there, so you don't need to specialize with the commander that you're using. So for open field purposes, Constantine with Olgi Mundak would be my recommendation as a third choice pick to Sun Tzu or to Joan of Arc. There is a couple other honorable mentions that I think are pretty gosh darn solid. One of them is Scipio. Man, if you wanted to make a really tanky march and you weren't even going to expertise your Constantine, you just made him 5-1-1-1 or 5-5-1-1. You could take your Scipio, make him the secondary, and boy, you're going to have a lot of damage taken reduction over here, a lot of counterattack damage boost. The only thing that I don't know is whether or not the damage taken reduction from Scipio is going to stack with the damage taken reduction from your Constantine. I think that it will, but that seems like a really good topic for another video. The other candidate that I think would be really solid as a secondary to do a bunch of damage, actually, would be Osman. The reason I like Osman is that the skill tree is going to be powering out that frequency of your active skill. That rage gen is through the roof. And so you're going to do a lot of damage because of this talent over here. I know I've talked about this a lot recently, but Osman under a high rage commander is going to turn into nearly legendary effectiveness. He's just so gosh darn powerful. So my number one pick is going to be a commander like Sun Tzu, who's just going to generate a ton of rage, do a bunch of damage, be very effective. My number two pick will be Joan of Arc. And from there, Olgi Mundak and Osman. If you're talking about using a Joan of Arc, I just want to call attention to the fact that most top tier Canyon players still use Joan of Arc, and most of them are hiding their Joan of Arc behind a Constantine. So Constantine is a really solid investment as an infantry legendary commander if you're going to pick just one. Now, if that wasn't compelling enough and you say, you know what, Chisgule, I really just want to do Alexander the Great anyways, there's a couple epic pairs I would recommend beyond Sun Tzu, beyond Joan of Arc, which now I'm going to bump up Boudica above all the other choices because she is going to be reducing the attack of the target, very solid, reducing their rage, she's going to do healing, she's going to generate rage. That I think is going to be really exceptional. Now, if we cast a much wider lens that we're looking at here, and we say, okay, Chisgule, but let's look at literally all of the legendary infantry commanders. And if we had to pick one, which one would it be? I'm going to make the argument that for a free-to-play to low spender, Constantine is still a very, very good pick. I don't love Leonidas because, look, he's not actually offering a lot of utility. He's very tanky. He's generating more rage, but he's not really great for rallying. He's not really great for defending stuff. He's good in the open field. He's good for Canyon, but that's it. And I feel like if you're not spending big money, you need to get more value out of your commanders. So I don't think Leonidas is the pick. In a similar vein, I'm not going to recommend Guan Yu to you. Yes, there is utility here in the 3-second silence, and you could use him as a 5-1-1-1 commander and just sort of enjoy the silence effect. He's a fun commander to use in the field. He's very squishy and doesn't honestly have a lot of utility or combinability with other commanders. He's got to be the primary as well. So unlike Sun Tzu, who could be the primary, could be the secondary, he's making it so you take less damage. He makes it so you generate a bunch of rage. He makes it so you deal more skill damage, right? Like, he doesn't have all those perks. He's raw damage with a silence. I don't think he's the pick either. In fact, I would say that before you do Guan Yu, I think you're better off with a commander like Alexander the Great. So I'd pick Constantine as my number 1, Alexander the Great as my number 2, Richard the First as my number 3, and gosh, 4 I guess would be Guan. 5 is even Charles Martel, even though he comes from Gold Keys, and 6 is like Leonidas. I mean, like, bottom of the barrel, okay? And even if Charles Martel didn't come from Gold Keys, I still don't think he's the pick for the one that you expertise. I just think that the rage engine from the support tree is so good from Constantine. Now, if you are doing a Constantine primary, you're going to want to go into the support tree similar to how we have over here. Something like this, except no Cage of Thorns. You're not going to need that. You're picking up Rejuvenate for the 150 Rage whenever an active skill is used. You're definitely going to want to grab Loose Formation for skill damage taken reduction. I think that this talent, Emergency Protection, is also really solid. And the majority of your other points, you're going to want to drop into the Infantry tree. So you're going to want to do something like this with your talent points. Potentially, if you want a little more march speed, you could drop into Fleet of Foot, and that would be really solid as well. And, you know, I think that at this moment in time, in Rise of Kingdoms, Constantine is looking really good. Constantine has really kind of shocked all of us when you look at the initial predictions for what I had sort of estimated of what this commander could be and would do. At the end of the day, the utility here, reducing the attack of a target by 40% and damage taken of everybody nearby by 10%, is massive. The fact that they are a garrison commander is really, really solid. And this heal is pretty marginal. I mean, it's good when you get it, but it's only once an hour, right? So, like, it's good, but infrequent. It's not a huge part of what this commander does. I'd originally thought that this would be really a huge detriment to this commander, but quite frankly, I think he's still very exceptional. If I wasn't saving all of my freaking legendary commander sculptures to figure out what the next meta will be, I would certainly be considering investing in him. He's good in canyon. He's good in open field. He's a part of dealing with Attila and Takeda. Yeah, he does a lot of really phenomenal stuff. Now, if we shift our lens a little bit and say, all right, let's throw money out the window. It's no objective. We have infinite legendary commander sculptures. If I'm picking one legendary commander, which one is it going to be? And I would make the argument, this is tough, I would make the argument that if you're picking only one and you're a big spender, that the choice is probably going to be Alexander the Great, because you're going to care about open field and rallying stuff. But Guan Yu is looking pretty spicy for open field and rallying stuff. Also good in canyon. This is something I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be watching you, Guan Yu. I'm watching you. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do drop a like on the video. Consider subscribing if you're into commander guides. We're going to be doing the same thing that we just did for infantry and for cavalry. Card up in the top if you want to see a couple of my cavalry videos where we looked at one legendary cavalry commander with one epic cavalry commander and what epic cavalry commander pairs we would do. We're going to do the same thing with archers, looking at what are the best epic archer pairs, and then also getting a look at one legendary archer with one epic archer. What would we recommend? Until next time, my friends, you have fun smashing the kingdom. And by the way, leave a comment down below. Which of these infantry commanders are you working on and why? Do you think I nailed this list or am I off base? Leave a comment.